Maybe wait for one person to show up. Starting some coffee. Just a little bit. Well, this would be part 2. We started off kind of with the genesis there of getting into collecting, maybe having the mind for it, forming your opinions and ideas and a path of where you want to go. Maybe you just want to grow apples, bananas. There's already someone growing apples and bananas. That was my theory. So this is just kind of my little journey. And this is for Jaboticaba, the video I'm talking about. Most of the facts is just going to be on Jaboticaba because that was my focus of interest. And it is to encourage you to grow Jaboticaba the same way. But also to think of other fruits that are out there, maybe like the passion fruit is a nice one. Pawpaws, the Asimina triloba, and all the different Asiminas that are in Florida. Those represent good candidates to try to further the cause. Anonas, the Atamoyas and the sugar apples, and hybridizing those are very fast to fruit, easy to fruit in a pot. People really like the fruit. You know, I strayed away from those because they're not as long as a lived tree as like the Jaboticaba, and the season for them to fruit is different. You got a lot of trouble if you have like a hurricane or a hard freeze with those, so it was less forgiving for me to grow the sugar apples and the Atamoyas and the custard apples. I used to collect all the Anonas. A lot of work to be done with the Anonas, the Garcinias. I'm working on the Garcinias presently. There's always work to be done on other plants. So remember I said in the first video, it's important to consider the scientific name. You really gotta familiarize yourself with the botanical names out there. Of course the common names too. But those botanical names are going to mean so much when you're into collecting and trying not to get the same thing twice. Now do some research. I worked at a bunch of different nurseries too. That was the other thing I did. I worked at a place called Appenberries. Yep, I worked at Appenberries. I think I did. I worked at Appenberries. Then I worked at Blodgett's. Those were just local nurseries in Orlando. They may still be there. They're nice nurseries. They just sold kind of regular old plants. I just wanted to get in the business and learn about it, so I got some experience there. I did a lot of work for people that did yard care, lawn maintenance, which actually taught me a lot too. So these are some things that may draw you in if you already do lawn maintenance. I notice a lot of people do lawn maintenance already and get drawn into the rare fruit because they're working with plants for a living and they have customers that want stuff put in, things like that. But there's a lot of different avenues for you to get drawn in to collecting, growing, and breeding fruit. And you always want to consider, you're growing fruit, that's like a meal, man. That's going to sell. People need to eat. If you're growing food, that's something that is a positive. I mean, if people don't eat it, pigs will eat it or something's going to eat it. Birds will eat it. Pets will eat it. Stuff wants to eat it. And it's perishable. So it's here today, gone tomorrow. And it's valuable. It's hard to find. Some of the stuff you got to grow it yourself. You may be the only show in town that has it, and that's a good thing. You get other people interested in it. So I worked at all those places. I worked at Appenberries and Blodgett's, which are just regular nurseries. I worked in landscaping. Then I got a job. Larry Schatzer's place was a great place to work at, Our Kids Nursery. I worked with Curtis Mosey. I worked at Green's Nursery in Apopka. And he let me rent there. That was key. I didn't mention this in the last video. I talked about how I got foreclosed and I was renting. And renting the house next door after I got foreclosed. And it's difficult to keep up with rent. Like, if you're just a guy who wants to start a business and you don't have a farm, but you're already renting a house. You don't own the house. You can start to grow on your plot that you're renting. Quarter acre, you can start a business there with some rare plants and make decent money on it. Quarter acre lot. John Kimber is proof of that in Winter Park. He's been doing it for years. You don't need a lot of space. But let's say you do start, and what normally someone that doesn't have a lot of money is going to start at a rental property. You start growing in little pots, not in the ground, right? You're going to have a thing for growing in pots because they're portable, and you can't put them in the ground. You're renting, so you can have them in pots. And that's another sell point for people who are renting. They're like, well, I got to keep it in a pot. I'm renting. So you can always sell a plant to someone. If you can say it'll stay in a pot, it'll fruit in a pot for years, a renter is going to be able to buy it. Whereas someone who, you know what I'm trying to say, it makes the plant more sellable to have it fruiting in a pot. And that's why I focused on plants that fruit in pots. Yeah, I was going somewhere with that. Went through so many jobs, so many places. Green's Nursery is where I ended up at finally. And see, I was renting and growing plants at my house when I started my business. And then I rented property somewhere else at another grower's place. I found another farm. It was called Welker Plants. My dad knew the guy. He grew ornamental plants, but he let me take all my stock there and rent. And I paid him monthly, and I paid him a portion of the profit on my fruit that I sold. I had miracle fruit there that we were growing commercially, hundreds of plants. We produced thousands of fruit. And he would do the growing, and I brought the plants there. That's where a lot of the hybrids originated, actually, where I got them from Larry Schatzer's house. I was working at his place, and the first time that his Plinia trunciflora fruited, I was there. I gathered the fruit. He let me plant the seeds and have some seeds. I think I bought like 200 seeds maybe, or he gave them to me. We traded. I planted those out, and they stayed at Welker's farm, which I was renting at. And he grew those out, and I selected out all the ones that looked crazy. But there was hundreds of seedlings that I planted that year that I thought were just going to be trunciflora seeds, but they turned out to be hybrids. And that was through networking, going to Larry Schatzer's house, and then also forming another partnership with someone else who I was renting at their farm, and he'd help me grow and keep them going. From RP Welker's, I moved over to Greens. Greens was growing tropical fruit, and he was right down the road, and I was buying plants from his nursery. They're still in business. It's called Greens Nursery. It's a really good business, but he allowed me to rent there. If you go to the Weird Fruit Explorer, Jared, his channel, and look up the Patanga tuba, I was renting at Greens Nursery at that time. So I was going in between three places: my rental home in Winter Park, rental farm property that, I was renting greenhouse space at Welker's, and I was renting at Greens. I consolidated everything over to Greens, so that now I just had two locations. And eventually I got my own property here in 2014, and I pulled everything from my house in Winter Park and from Greens, and I had to move trucks. It was just trucks at a time of plants. And I bought this property here, Sanford, Florida, because it was 3.5 acres and it had greenhouses ready to go. The people that were here before me grew bromeliads. They had a bromeliad nursery. I didn't want to live in a manufactured home, and but I chose this property because of its location close to Orlando, and wasn't too far out. 3.5 acres, greenhouses ready to go. But I think if you're just getting started in this, you're going to start growing just small scale on your rental property or where your parents' house if you don't own your own property. Slowly you can meet another grower or someone that's a friend of yours that has property where you can start your nursery. It's easy to legally start a nursery anywhere in Florida. You just lay down your black cloth, call the ag agent and be like, I'm starting a nursery. Come inspect. And they'll do it at your residence. You can start a nursery at your residence legally in Florida. I don't know about your other states, but it's not hard to do. So you do that. That's what I did. I'm just telling you what I did. So that's kind of all besides the point. On my journey, though, when I first got into the growing, there was a lot of confusion on the names. No, I don't have weed mat in the whole yard. No, I don't. It's all over the place, but it's not in the whole yard. No, just in certain places. But when I first got into growing, there was a lot of more confusion among the names. There was only for sale at all of the nurseries. You would go and you ask for jaboticaba, and they had what was just called jaboticaba, all right? I call it Sabara, but you got to see, back in 2007, or 2006, when I got into growing, there was no Sabara. No one called it Sabara, period, at any of the nurseries. Just remember that. They were all listed as Myrcieria, not Plania. It was Myrcieria cauliflora. And still to this day, a lot of the big nurseries still have it labeled as Myrcieria cauliflora, which is a synonym for Plania, jaboticaba, Plania cauliflora, whatever. They're all synonyms basically. But the way the information came out in the new book from Brazil, they changed the names around. And I went through the book and looked at it, and trying to piece everything together, I started to say, this one that we have that everyone's calling Myrcieria cauliflora is not the same as what the book says. That's different. That would have been more like the red jaboticaba, all right? The regular, most common, widespread jaboticaba in the world is Sabara, Plania jaboticaba. The genus is Plania, species jaboticaba. The variety is called Sabara. That was not like a commonly known fact just about 7 years ago. Everyone in the industry, basically in America, in the world, just called their jaboticaba, and it was Myrcieria cauliflora. I took what they put in the Brazil book and started to tell everyone and post on the Tropical Fruit Forum, hey, everyone, the stuff that you have, the name is changed. And then there's all these varieties that I was starting to pull up from other people's collection. I started to identify them based on the fruit, flowers, leaves, and started to be like, this is this, this is this, this is this. And there just was no variety when I got into the business. I remember it being a big deal that I had the red jaboticaba. Just the red was a big deal. Now it's more so commonplace. It's actually displacing the Sabara in the market because it fruits faster, it stays smaller, and it fruits more. So it's displacing the original one. It has done so at my nursery. I grow, let's say, however many thousand plants. Of those thousands of plants, the percentage of Sabara that I grow is very low. And the reason for that is I was able to source them from other growers who are already growing them well. They're already widespread. It's the most widespread in the world. Everyone's growing it. It's widely available. I don't think it's going anywhere because it's easy to keep alive. It's easy to plant the seeds. It's easy to get a ton of fruit. There's people in Hawaii with them. There's people in Texas, Florida, California, other states. So it's not that hard to keep it alive and to keep the fruit going on Sabara. There's trees out there. There's going to be seedlings every year. And the price is probably going to come down because more and more people plant the seeds. I think you can still get wholesale a nice tree about this big that's ready to graft if you're buying 100 of them for like $5 to $10 at the most. I mean, maybe 3 if you know someone who's got a ton of them. So I in years past, I'll just buy my Sabaras. I don't want to have them out there. Everyone else has got them. But now I do have a Sabara tree out there, one that I keep around. to plant the seeds of, and to see if anything comes up hybrid. You got to have one, in my opinion. You got to have a tree. And I've got one out there, and it's finally fruited. They take a long time to fruit. This one took like 15 years. I might go out and take a look at it here in a minute and continue the video. I don't want to stray too far. I'm going to let this coffee cool down. We'll head outside, talk more about this foundation that is Sabara. Yeah, so when I first got in the business, it was just Jabuticaba. Everyone had everything confused. The yellow Jabuticaba was labeled as Myrcearia glomerata. Well, that's not the same thing. That's totally different. And then you would go to buy a Cambuca, and they would sell you a yellow Jabuticaba. I remember that happening. I was pissed. You know, you're first getting into the game, and people were giving you plants, and they had a leaf that looked different. You got excited, but I can't tell you how confusing it was between these three plants right here. This one is called the yellow Jabuticaba, which was the first kind of off the beaten path one that I could find at a nursery. I had to hunt around. The place that had it was Hopkins Nursery, I think. And they had sold it to another nursery in Rockledge. I drove out to Rockledge and found the tree. It looked like shit. It was in a pot and burnt to hell. That was the story of a lot of trees I found, where it looked like shit. But I did track down one of the only frickin' yellow Jabuticabas that was for sale in the state. And this was years ago. I called up Hopkins Nursery, talked to Barbara and Billy, and she was really nice and put me in touch with the nursery that she sold them to. I went over to the nursery in Rockledge and paid them $40 for a big ass tree and a 15-gallon. The tree looked like shit. And I took it home, and it responded very well to some care. And they had it labeled as Myrcearia glomerata, I think. Or maybe I went to buy it as a Cambuca, I think. I wasn't going to buy a yellow Jabuticaba. I was asking about the Cambuca. They sent me there, and I ended up getting a yellow Jabuticaba labeled as Myrcearia glomerata. And I was like, this is so fucked. I was like, no one knows anything about these things. Anyway, so this is pretty common one that was, you could find these kind of going to South Florida and hole-in-the-wall nurseries. It's called Myrcearia, okay? It's not a Plania, it's a Myrcearia. You can't graft it onto Sabara. So this is Myrcearia glazioviana, Glazioviana, glazioviana. It's named after some guy, I think. And it's called Cabaluda, that's the common name. So that one I got labeled as Myrcearia glomerata. That's a totally different tree, I'll show you in a second. But this is what I was trying to get. This is the Cambuca, Plania edulis. The fruit is this big, and it's much rarer than the yellow Jabuticaba or the Cabaluda, Myrcearia glazioviana. Okay, that was mislabeled as glomerata. But I was trying to buy a Cambuca. They sold me yellow Jabuticaba, but this is a Plania. This is not a Myrcearia, this is a Plania. And the way you can tell that it's a Plania is simply, for me, by the bark. See that bark? Look how it peels like that in patches, and it's got multicolors. That's Plania-like, flaking off. See all the flakes on it like that. And the multicolored patches, that is like a Plania, okay? And then there's your fruit. It gets big, really big. It's one of my favorite ones. And got another one over there. Cambuca. It was very hard to find this at first. In nurseries, it was very difficult to find a Cambuca. I had to track them down. I went to collectors and found them through their collections. I'll go through some names, but there was 1, 2, 3, 4. At least 4, 5. You know, there's at least 5. But there's 5 people that or more. You know, there's 6, 7. But there's a list of people that I met that built this nursery, actually, that I don't mention all the time. But through their work in sharing with me their collection, I was able to build my collection. And that came through coming on doing all the networking through the online forums and trading with people. They saw that I was honest and trustworthy, and that I had a real passion for this. So when it came time for these people to either move out of the state or unwind and get rid of some plants in their collection, they bestowed it upon me. I had at least 3 people in the same year that all dumped their plants on me, being like, listen, I got to go out of state, or I just have all these plants and you can take whatever you want. And they had been doing years of collecting before I even got into the game. So I got like grandfathered in and inherited all their hard work. So this tree that you see right here was grown by someone else and give to me or traded with me or whatever. And this tree, a lot of these trees. So I honestly right now would not have the advantage I have and be so far ahead of the game if it weren't for some key individuals. So that's what I'm saying for you to consider. It'd be so hard to get anywhere and get any progress without the help of kind people that help you out and that you can trust, and networking. So I just want to say this tree right here was sent to me as a seed from a gentleman. This one, they were all kind people. This one, all my most special trees, matter of fact, came from collectors that grew them, and I just got to plant the seed and got to have the benefit of all their hard work, and I thank them. So I do. And then even the anomaly, right? A guy that I met sent me the seed because he was like, can you identify this? He kind of heard about me as the guy that knew about him, and he sent me the seeds just to be kind. I would not even have any of these extra precocious trees. There's the original one right there, the original anomaly tree. If it weren't for the kindness of a man saying, oh, can you identify this? I'll send you some seeds. And I planted the seeds and I got something special. It's because I planted thousands of seeds. And I looked at everything and said, oh, don't sell that. Hang on to that. That was big. This is a seedling of the anomaly. I'm going to sell this fruit actually on my website here soon. But this is a fruit of the anomaly. It was really fun and a really slow process to figure out that you got something different and unique. That, to me, is one of the greatest thrills in life. It's like landing a skateboard trick, but in slow motion, and it never stops happening. And like you just keep, it just like, I don't understand. It's like a wave that you're riding that doesn't stop riding. It just keeps happening, and you keep waking up from the dream and saying it's real. It's like winning the lottery, but not really, because it's not that you're monetarily going to get rich, even though you will make some money, but you have something that's different, and that's, it's just fun sometimes. It's like scratch off. You won the lottery, you got a special card. There's that kind of feeling that goes with it. I guess it's like a healthy form of gambling, because your only gamble is that you planted another seedling that turned out to be the same. Like there's no loss in that, but it's like good for people who have a compulsion to gamble maybe, or take a risk, or scratch off. I mean, that's the only way I can compare it to. Maybe, I don't know. But all these, you think of them like scratch off tickets. What did I get? What did I get? You got to have the patience to figure out what you got, which takes years. Okay, let's walk over here and hope we don't lose much connection. And I did want to talk about the Sabara. And so Sabara is the foundation. Think of it kind of like, this is the way I've always described it, is like a dog, but the wolf. The wolf is the foundation for the dog. And then you have all the different varieties of the dog, Chihuahua. We could get into arguing the difference between species and variety. And I think with the Jabuticaba, the lines are really blurred, because what they said was a species, Plinia ariana, is basically a synonym for Plinia phitrantha. They're basically the same. And I have sent in material to be genetically tested to see what the difference was between all the hybrids that I had and all of the species. And when I did it, the fella told me that they needed to go further down, and that essentially the markers were all the same and it all looked the same, and there was no difference between anything. That includes Trunciflora, white Jaboticaba, hybrids of the red and the Trunciflora, Gremel, I mean everything. It had all the same markers. So what that tells me is it's all the same damn thing. And it's all probably rooted to something similar to this tree right here. That's the Sabara, the foundation. And it's a sweet fruit. It's really adaptable. It's not so sensitive to like soil pH or water quality issues. You can grow them in the lime rock and they'll stay alive as long as you fertilize them and water them and keep the acid on them. So they're a strong tree, much more versatile than some of the other varieties. Like the Trunciflora doesn't perform as well on the lime rock. Even the Gremel had some trouble from what I saw at Fruit and Spice Park and in the Keys, okay? So, you know, I don't know what it is, but this is the most widespread variety, and I think of it like the wolf. And you see how the bark has got the flaky and peeling, and there's a signature to a tree with its bark color and the way the leaves look, the colors of the bark, the color of the new growth, position of the leaves, hair on the leaves. They call that pubescence. Those are all things you got to look for when you're trying to scan for new hybrids. You got to form like a baseline opinion, and then from there you can say, okay, well, this looks different from what I know to be the baseline, and this is like the baseline, whatever. This is like the regular one that everyone freaking had. So when I went out into the world back in 2006 or 7 and I started collecting, you went to nurseries, this was Jaboticaba, and this was all you could find. It was called Myrcieria cauliflora, nothing about anything about Sabara, and it was just called Jaboticaba. And you were lucky to find it. They were hard to find. There was not a ton of them. I paid like $250 for a 15-gallon or 25-gallon tree. And I wanted a fruiting one. And it came from Hopkins Nursery. And I got it from another nursery indirect. You know, they sent it to Lucas Nursery, and then I got it from them. So, and once I started to go around and look for anything different than this stupid leaf right here, and you'll get confused a lot where this will be grown in the shade, and sometimes the leaves just look different on Sabara. There's varieties of the Sabara. If you go to enough nurseries, you probably could find some varieties of the Sabara. This one right here is, I believe, a hybrid of the Sabara and the Gremel, and I've had it for years. It's flowered, but it hasn't set fruit yet. But if you take a look here at the bark, you can really see the difference between the bark on this and the other one. Very beautiful tree. This one I'd like to propagate and give a name to, but it's got to fruit first. I can't name it until it fruits. It's just kind of that tree over there for now. But look at the new growth on this. If you've planted a bunch of seeds that were Trunciflora, I'm sorry, not Trunciflora, Sabara and Gremel, and something like this comes out, you would know by looking at the leaf that it's something different. It has to do with the shape, the color, the hair on it. But this almost looks like a Trunciflora, but there was no Trunciflora seeds planted that year. This is the Trunciflora over here. It's very confusing, but it looks almost identical to a Trunciflora. This is a grafted Trunciflora I got from Larry Schatzer's house years ago. I took a mature cutting, and it's taking forever to flower. Oh, it's over 10 years old, and it hasn't flowered yet, I'm sure. And I've grafted smaller ones that flowered before it. So it doesn't make sense sometimes of why they take so long to flower certain varieties, even though they're grafted. It can be very frustrating. I've taken scions from a tree that was grafted here and sold them, or grafted trees that were sold from mother trees that aren't fruiting and flowering here, and they'll flower and fruit before my mother tree. So look at all this fruit right here. This is a red jabuticaba. I remember the first time I saw the red jabuticaba, it was in a setting just like this. I was at Larry Schatzer's house, and he liked to always leave his fruit on the tree. And I'd always be like, why don't you pick the fruit? You just leave it on the tree all the time. But now I get it. It's because you have customers coming and you've already tasted it. And like, you got to leave it on the tree because it sells when it's on the tree. Like, the tree will sell if you can have the fruit on the tree. And now I get it why he would just leave it on there and it would get stolen by the animals. It makes sense to me now because you want it on the tree if you got customers coming. And it tastes better when you let it ripen on the tree longer. But I remember walking up and having tasted the Sabara and then going up underneath his tree and grabbing a couple of these without his permission, tasted them, and chewing up the skin and being like, wow, that's totally different. And I said, wow, that's totally different. It blew my mind the first time I tasted it. This reminds me of it. He had a tree just like this. The fruit was bigger on his. So I don't know if you can still hear it. Someone's trying to call in repeatedly. So I hope you learned something, but I really wanted to talk about that. And I'm going to try to throw in a couple more tidbits as long as I have some audio left. There's a couple of things I want to talk about before I go that concern the Sabara and grafting. Full of fruit. Wow. Yeah, this one's full of fruit. I'm surprised this time of year it doesn't get stolen. I guess it's a seasonal thing. The rain and the colder weather. The animals aren't so thirsty and they're not stealing it, I guess, but it's a seasonal thing. And I got enough rats out here to steal all this fruit. They just haven't found it yet. I was going through my pots outside and saw a rat last night. Anyhow. This will be for sale on my website if I can remember to list it, or if anybody wants to come pick it up locally, I can sell it pretty cheap. I don't know how cheap, but cheaper than if I shipped it. I had a guy come today and pick up some Sanford fruit. Oh, I dropped those on the ground. I sold him a nice amount pretty cheap and gave him a deal. I'd rather do that than have him sitting. All right, we still got audio. All right, I'm gonna keep moving. That's what I pulled off of there. That amounts to about $50 worth of fruit. If someone were to come pick this up locally, I'd sell it for like 20 bucks. 20 bucks would be fine for local pickup. If I had to ship it, I'd have to get 50 bucks all said and done, you know, 50 bucks shipped, just about 50 bucks shipped. So yeah, let's talk about that Sabara one more time. I want you to think about this when you're thinking about grafting, because I have a lot of people that will ask me questions about graft compatibility. First off, if you're going to be like, can I take a Suriname cherry, that's right there, Suriname cherry, and graft it onto a Grumachama? That's the answer is probably no. And see, that's confusing because you have a Eugenia right here and a Eugenia, same genus, different species. This is Eugenia brasiliensis. This is Eugenia uniflora. You can't hybridize these by cross-pollinating, and you can't graft them onto each other successfully long term. You may be able to get them to take and push for a little while, but then they'll die shortly after. But now hear me out. Here we have Plinia, right? Same genus, so it's like the same genus, but this is Plinia phitrantha. And then over here, we have Plinia cauliflora, right? You can graft these two onto each other, and you can make stable hybrids of them. You know what that tells me is that they're the same species, and we're looking at different varieties. And they've got all the species as species that are actually just varieties. So Plinia phitrantha is just another variety of the Sabara or Plinia jabuticaba. They all should be Plinia jabuticaba is my gripe. That's my concern. That's what I think. Maybe I'm wrong. Some asshole can tell me I'm wrong, and that's fine. But I'm not able to produce hybrids or graft on those Eugenias that are in the same genus. These are Plinias that are in the same genus. I can make hybrids that are stable, and I can graft them interchangeably. It doesn't make sense that they're different species. Same species, different varieties. This one here is a seedling of the Coronata hestinga and the Grimmel. I don't know if anyone can tell, but if you look at the leaf, it's just different than the baseline. It's a really nice tree. You always got to consider the bark. You got to look at the bark when you're searching for hybrids or something new. Look at your bark and what does the bark look like and how does it peel? What's the colors? There's usually a 3-color pattern where you have the old oxidized bark, the bark that is not so old and newer, and then the fresh, new bark that's not oxidized at all. And you get a 3-color pattern usually, at least a 2-color pattern. But it's nice to see those patterns. Look, Sabara, 3-color pattern. 1, 2, 3. Kimber hybrid. You can see the separation at the graft union. Look how much redder it is. It's got a red color to it. It's much redder. The patches peel, smaller patches. And so it's got a different 3 multicolor pattern. And, you know, the leaf is different. Just trying to give you ideas on how to tell these things apart. Look at the pattern on this bark here. This is the grandifolia. It's like a tan and beige, a reddish tan beige. So you always got to take note of your bark colors when you're sorting the trees. Oh my God, my good saw out in the damn sand rusting like that. So anyhow, Sabara is the baseline, the foundation. Got to have it. I think it is what you're looking at. Essentially the same species as everything you see. And remember, it gets confusing when you try to graft. You cannot graft, and I tried, Myrcieria onto a Plinia. That's a Myrcieria. And you'll see the bark. I'll try to show you if I can before I end the video. Sorry. Let's go through this one more time like I said in the beginning of the video. I'm sorry I jumped all around, folks. This is a Myrcieria right here. The yellow jabuticaba. Now look at this as a perfect example of why you can't graft it. I'm gonna get cut up by these stupid thorns. There's a Plinia right here. Myrcieria. Look at the bark. It doesn't peel like that. It's furrowed like an oak tree or some shit. See that? That's not right for a Plinia. That's a Myrcieria. See that? How the bark is like that? It doesn't. That's a Plinia. That's a Plinia. You got to know that. You can't graft that onto that because it don't look like that. It's not going to work. Look at the bark. If the bark looks similar, then you got a chance. If the leaf looks similar, that's one thing. But the leaves don't look similar. And believe it or not, I never thought you could graft this Cambuca right here. That's a Plinia, just like the Sabara. Even though I think it's more distantly related, I don't think this is the same species as Sabara. But you can graft this onto Sabara, and you see how the bark is peeling like that, like a Plinia. Look at this. It's just the glomerata, Myrcieria glomerata. The bark doesn't peel. It looks more like the Glazioviana, the Myrcieria. So you can't graft that onto a common jabuticaba. This fucking fan's driving me nuts. This is the one that everyone would confuse for the yellow Jaboticaba, Myrcea glomerata. You can't even graft that onto a yellow Jaboticaba. I tried. So that is a unique species. I don't think you can cross it with the yellow Jaboticaba. I'm gonna show you one more tree that's a bit of confusion. And I want to tell you why, and I'll be done. But this is all goes into breeding and the foundation of Plinia Sabara, you know, the Jaboticaba, Plinia Jaboticaba variety Sabara. All these are Plinias. This one here, Plinia Phitrantha. Look at the bark color. And the peeling. This is a Phitrantha bronca. To me, it looks exactly like the white Jaboticaba, which it probably is the same as the Plinia ariana, but they call it Plinia Phitrantha, Phitrantha bronca. But this one right here, this stupid tree right here, this one they call Plinia rivularis. But you know what? It looks like a damn Myrcea to me, because look at the bark. Get the bark on it. Looks like a Myrcea. I have actually grafted this onto a trunciflora, and it took and lived for a couple years, but then it died. So it's very strange how that works. But I had this grafted on a trunciflora for a couple years, and then it died. But I think this should be designated as a Myrcea, not a Plinia. That's my humble opinion on that. Look at the bark. Don't go trying to graft it onto a Plinia. Okay? This is ESALQ. Sabara rootstock, you see the bark? Boom. ESALQ, Phitrantha bark. Different color. Look at this one. This is a hybrid of the Grimmel and the Phitrantha, I believe. That's based on my scientific opinion. I haven't been able to prove it yet. It could be something different actually altogether. This is one of my favorite trees to look at. Look at the bark on it. Nice bark. Nice color pattern. I like that tail. Oh. And the leaf is very interesting, thick. Cardboard-like. Look at the shapes, straight up kind of like a column. Top-notch tree right there. Something different. Look at these leaves. Took years. Years, my friend. All right? Yeah, that's really interesting. And then you see this one, the triple leaf. I'll show it again. Something odd to look for. I was going through my plants and you just notice certain things, but this one is offset. The nodes are twisted. That's not common. 3. Third leaf. Third leaf. Third leaf. Third leaf. Isn't that weird? They're not supposed to have a third leaf. They just have 2 leaves. Alternate. Opposite. Whatever the hell you call it. Opposite. Not alternate. Opposite leaves. So this one is a hybrid, and it's showing some kind of hybrid something going on there. Likes to do that. Strange bird. It does what it wants. No, it didn't throw double flowers. It made a little tiny fruit, but it was a runt. Okay. Oof. I've got one more fruit I want to go check on. This one may be a hybrid of the Otto Anderson and the Grimmel. It keeps fruiting and the fruit gets stolen every time. I need to net the tree up. I'm gonna go over the first trees that I got that were kind of interesting. Oh, there it is. It's ripe. This one I thought was maybe a hybrid of the Grimmel and the Otto Anderson. It's only made a runt fruit so far. You can't judge a tree by its first fruit, but it seems ready. Let's taste it. Yep. Yep. I bet you that's what I think it is. The skin is very, very much like a grimmel. The tree's gonna have to prove itself. As for now, I haven't sold any or named it, but I've grafted extras of it. The fruit needs to get bigger, but it's got the grimmel in it for sure. I tasted it. That skin was thick skin. Look at this tree here. This one may be a hybrid of the anomaly. I don't know. Look at this tree. It's really gorgeous. I'm going to repot it right now. I like this tree. It is so strong. Like the other ones got burnt leaf tips and this and that. This thing is nothing. And look at the leaf on it. It's not a white jabuticaba. It's like something else. It's one of the ones I had labeled as a hybrid. I think it's a hybrid of the Phitrantha, the Sanford possibly. I'm going to put it in a bigger pot right now. Yeah, this is its sibling tree right here. This is the one that's from the same batch. But this one is slowly becoming the star, where it's just stronger than the other one. This is the other one where it's a Sanford, possibly with the anomaly. I've got one of these that finally flowered, but I've got several of them that I made one year, tried to make. This one should flower anytime now. It's not. It's so close. I see it trying. Anyhow, I'm gonna put this in a bigger pot. This tree right here, I like it a lot. Is that a haiku? I'm going to put this in a bigger pot. This tree, I like it a lot. Same I am. I will not wear a hat. The red jaboticaba blue is also skinny but somewhat fat. Okay. Well, I guess I don't need to show you guys doing that, do I? I might not even have the soil to accomplish this. Should we keep it on? Let's repot it. It's hot out here. I got a sweater on and I do not need a sweater. This is not sweater weather right now. It's hot out. This is incredibly hot actually. A little soil here. This is the same fucking size pot I had it in. The sign of a true degenerate. Yeah. Gonna need a bigger boat. Hold on one sec. You know, I don't know if I have enough soil. I only have that one big Sabara tree in the ground, but I actually have a ton of Sabaras. They're everywhere. I grow them in pots and I sell them. And you graft on them too. The nice thing about a Sabara is you can graft them after they get really big and it'll make the tree fruit faster. Something about having that rootstock, the big tree to top work. Look at that root. Yeah, root ball's healthy. That's the time to do it. Filled up the bottom, not coiled up or nothing. Nice tree. Nice tree. Right into a 15-gallon. From like a 7 to a 15. I think I got just enough soil, maybe. Maybe not. There's a couple. Howdy, strangers. We'll show you guys a couple Sabara trees here that I keep. I did plant some out. I forgot. I've got about 5 of them planted out, maybe. And they do really well without much care. They do a lot better if you water them and fertilize them. If you don't water them and fertilize them, they'll just sit there and look green probably and happy as long as they're not in too much sunlight. If you have them where the pH is too high and they're in too much sunlight, they'll cook up. The leaves will turn yellow. Oh, gonna need more soil than that. Anyway. It's close. Almost made it. Take a look at that tree. I'm sweating. Oh, here's a tomato I tried to grow that died. I can use it as long as there's no ants in it. No ants. Some good soil there. That'll top me off. Goodbye, tomato. These pots suck. They just break for nothing. The green ones. They must come. They're so cheap. They do work for one growing season, and it is a good size. I'll never buy them again. I would much rather the black pots. I can't stand these. It's stepping on them and breaking them. It's like a bad feeling. It can really cut your foot too. They're a danger. All right, I think this is sufficiently potted here. Let me get out these sticks and pull this aside. This is one of my favorite trees to look at. I don't know that it'll do anything special, but it looks nice. I can pull this piece of shit over here and temporarily just kind of leave it in the way. Right like that. Here, right there. I think it's got some Phatrantha blood. Only thing that can stay that green without burning up is Phatrantha usually. That has a leaf like that. But it's got some hybrid blood in it. I do think it could have some anomaly. Who knows? Maybe not. Anyhow. Oh, I'm sweating. Look at these before I go. Bald eagles are screaming. These are all Sabara trees that I got years ago for like 10 bucks a piece. And they just kind of sit in a 3-gallon on the plastic mat in the shade, north side of an oak tree. And they do so well with minimal care. See these things? Size to graft, to go out in the field. You go and take one of these and graft a couple scions on it, like that Y shape. And for some reason, it seems like the bigger the tree and the more grafts you put on it, the better it does. It fruits faster, is what I'm trying to say. You get them to fruit a lot faster with big scions and a big tree to graft onto. You cut the tree back and prune it back to the branches that you want, and don't ever let anything grow from beneath the graft. And you can multiple graft a large rootstock with big scions and essentially top work the tree. I wanted to mention one other reason Sabara was important to me as a rootstock is it's widely available, it's cost effective, and it doesn't sucker. You could use the red, and a lot of people want to experiment with using the red jabuticaba, but what I've found is that it suckers too much. You don't want a rootstock that's going to sucker like crazy. The Sabara is well behaved when it comes to suckering. You can see these trees grafted on the Sabara. The rootstock will disappear. It almost goes underground over time. As the tree expands, the graft migrates downward. It's kind of counterintuitive, where if you have a grafted tree, you would think the graft would grow up. You see this right here? This tree is grafted. It's a double grafted tree. It's got a red. Okay, it's got a red and a trunciflora. They were grafted at the same time, same size scion. If you're trying to make a cocktail tree, it's going to be hard sometimes to match them up because it's like citrus. Grapefruit and pomelo will outgrow a key lime, finger lime. You can't just match up whatever you want, and they won't grow even, is my opinion on that. But I was trying to say, this tree, when I grafted it, it was a Y-shaped rootstock, and the scions were put on like a slingshot. It's up here and here with a Y. It migrated down as it expanded The Y is here now and really big and fat. But I'm telling you, it was up 6 inches, and up here it was up. It was up here. There was 8 inches of rootstock, 6 inches of rootstock, a stem like this coming up like a slingshot, and it migrated down to the ground. So the way that they grow when you graft them is the graft union doesn't travel up, it goes down because the tree is expanding. Think of it like like a shuttle launch, and all of the fumes and the gas coming out of the bottom when it goes up and the expansion, and then the shuttle going straight up. That's what's happening with the graft union. And the graft union is the launch pad point where the explosion takes place and the gas comes out, kind of thing. You know what I'm saying? You're watching the shuttle go up and you're seeing all that rocket shit, but it's going, the graft starts here and down, and it expands out and goes up. Kind of like a shuttle launch if you're tripping. All right, guys. Yeah, it'd be like the base of a cloud on a fucking shuttle launch, man. It's going down. The rocket's going up. All right, guys. Hopefully we have these fruit for sale soon. These are some of the top-notch. Otto Anderson, Vitrantha, top-notch. Really good fruit. Thank you for watching. I hope you learned something. Don't try to graft it if the bark doesn't look similar. It's probably not going to work. Sabara's something you're going to need. Sabara rootstocks. I got them all over the place. I don't sell them. I just use them. Any other questions before I take off? I want to say thanks a lot to everybody. I do have these fruit for sale for local pickup. If I had to ship them, it'd cost a little more. But send me a message if you want to grab them. They'll be good for a couple of days. Any other questions? Thanks for that. You're welcome. So yeah, they're over here, Gary. I'd do them for $70. They got to be sorted out, but I think that's worth 70. Yeah. Yeah, I do have them. All right, man. Yeah, I'll hook you up. What state are you in, Gary? What state are you in, Gary? Because if you're in Florida and you're making the purchase, then I can just throw in, we can work out a deal here. Florida, okay. Oh, man, it's always at the point where I'm trying to work a deal for those seedlings. Someone calls in and tries to block the magic. Hook you up, man, because you're in Florida. I really appreciate it. I'll try to send you something extra. But those seeds are sitting around. Deal. Send me a message. I'll figure it out maybe before Christmas, hopefully. Going to ship tomorrow. Orders online. I'm going to ship tomorrow. Thank you so much, guys. Have a great one. We're going to continue this. Sorry it's not so organized. I'm just trying to put something out there that is going to help you kind of. I want you to be excited like I am. You know, I've got my foot in the door. I've been doing this. What you're learning here for the Jabuticaba and the Plania can absolutely be applied to tomatoes and peppers or whatever you want. This is just one realm. The Eugenias, the Garcinias, Passiflora, papayas, carica, you know, all that. Think of anything that you can get to fruit in your lifetime and then try to do that one. But something like the mangosteen is harder. If you know it's going to take 20 years, I hope you're a young buck. Good luck. But I need something that I can fruit in 3 to 5 years, maybe 10 years at the most, and then I'll be good. Mangoes are okay, but that's a harder road to travel. I think the sugar apples are a great opportunity for an older fella who wants to get into breeding, like someone in their 60s even and 70s. You could make a little difference by doing sugar apples. They fruit in 2 to 3 years, and they're easy to breed and all of this. You just got to grow a ton of them and sort through them and be honest with yourself. And then, you know, network, collect varieties and meet people, and you can make a difference in the world. I believe in you. Thank you for watching. Have a wonderful day.